Good evening, fellow Cyclone watchers, and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update. Tonight, the 29th of January 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo. On your screen right now is a new addition to our website. Just while this particular tropical cyclone Dylan is in the making and threatening the Queensland coastline, we decided we'd put in some links up here on our website at the top of the page. The SES Get Ready guide telling you exactly what you need to be doing to prepare your house yourselves and your families, how to use sandbags, also the Get Ready Queensland website for those of you that need more information on what to do. Particularly of interest in this particular cyclone is the storm surge maps, because whether this becomes a cyclone, whether it remains a monsoon low, whether it becomes a Cat 2, Cat 1, doesn't really matter, because the storm surge threat is going to be very similar regardless. Anywhere to the south and east of the tropical cyclone or the tropical low is likely to receive a storm surge of approximately half a metre to a metre, maybe even up to 1.5 metres on top of the tide level. So the storm tide total has the potential to be a metre to a metre and a half above the highest astronomical tide. So if the tropical cyclone gets close to land, particularly looking at the Friday morning tide being quite large, definitely looking at the largest tide of the year, but it's exactly how high that water gets that will determine whether a lot of places will flood. So the storm surge maps are there for you for your part of the coastline. We haven't included Cairns there because we feel that Cairns probably won't have the threat that the other places do in terms of where this thing's going to track. So the other places there, from the Cassowary coast all the way down to Mackay, they're there for your perusal to make sure that you know whether you live in a difficult or a dangerous area for storm surge. Below that on our website will always be the latest cyclone video updates, and below that, if you'd like to purchase our app, which will give you some extra features there, we have that on sale on iTunes and Android for $1.99. Alright, let's get into tonight's update. We see some really good thunderstorm activity out here in the Pilbara-Kimberley region of WA. We've seen that now for a number of days. That was associated with a weak low that never really did anything. There is a new low that's going to form in this area and push out to the west next week, and that does have potential to form into a tropical cyclone well off the Kimberley or Pilbara coast, but we'll talk about that more once the Queensland system is done with and dealt with. Over the top end, we continue to see an increase in tropical thunderstorm development and convection associated with the monsoon. Look at this monsoon. The Torres Straits are getting smashed. The islands up here, Horn Island, Thursday Island, they are getting absolutely annihilated with rainfall and strong winds. The monsoon is really cranking, folks, and that is what's creating the convergence, particularly on the northern side of the tropical low here developing in the Coral Sea. And you can start to see it spinning now in the last sort of 6 to 12 hours. We do have enough rotation there to definitely see a recognised low pressure system. We have really two bands of thunderstorm activity associated with this low, one on the southern end or the southern periphery, one on the northern periphery. What we're going to see hopefully is that consolidate over a low level circulation centre over the next 12 to 18 hours. Once it does that, we should start to see it deepening and developing into a more normal type tropical cyclone. As we look at this circulation on radar, on Willis Island radar, you can see here the Queensland coast on the far left of your screen, and we can see that the system is tracking in almost a south-southwest direction pretty much over the last 3 to 6 hours, and is expected to adopt a more westerly to southwesterly track later on tomorrow as a ridge pushes in underneath it and builds in underneath it. But you can see some of the bands out here associated with some surging southeasterly winds, but really the circulation itself is located right in here. Looking at the last 9 hours on visible imagery, we can see the circulation centre here. Just in the last couple of frames there, just before it got dark, we started to see just the consolidation of some convection over the low-level circulation centre, which up until that point had a lot of convection out here to the south and out here to the north, but nothing actually developing over the circulation itself. We're starting to see that change, thank goodness, and this is likely to herald an onset of a deepening of the system overnight. On microwave imagery earlier today, we can see the what I'm talking about here. We have this big band of really heavy convective activity out here, and another band of heavy convective activity out here. But the actual low is located in here, in between those bands, and there wasn't much convection going on there until later on this afternoon, where it is starting to now consolidate. But really, still the strongest convection as of a couple of hours ago is still in this feeder band out here to the south, and also in the band associated with the monsoonal surge to the north. So really, we need those stronger storms to consolidate around the center, and that hasn't happened yet. The Joint Typhoon Warning Centre took the step around lunchtime today to name this a tropical cyclone. They believe, according to their standards, that this is a tropical cyclone. Note that the JTWC and the BOM have slightly different standards when it comes to tropical cyclones, measured by slightly different levels of wind speeds. So here we've got 35 knots located to the south of the system, but we do start to see 20 to 30 knots wrapping around more than halfway around the system here, and really starting to consolidate around the system core. If you're pretty well to the northwest of the system, you're not seeing too much, and northeast of the system, not seeing too much. But if you're anywhere in this southern semicircle, you do have a lot of wind, and really that's going to continue for the system's life cycle until probably just before landfall, where it might actually start to develop some gales around its northern quadrants. So here's the Joint Typhoon Warning Centre's track, and they do have it actually intensifying steadily as it pushes in a southwest direction all the way to landfall. Look, folks, cyclones very rarely travel in a straight line, so be prepared to see a few wobbles and a few shimmies and a few shakes on the way to the coastline. So don't be surprised if this track does vary in terms of its landfall location. You can see fairly large potential error margin coming out of this track, because the guidance isn't 100% on the Townsville crossing. It could be a little bit south of that, it could be a little bit north of that, but overall we see a southwest movement and a gradual development of the system. The JTWC puts it at just on borderline category 2 tropical cyclone strength as it hits the coast, but the Bureau of Meteorology continues to look at this as a 1, and most of the model guidance continues to show this as a 1, moderate to high level 1, but still a 1. So if we look at the GFS forecast model plot, and we see that the system is expected to push in a south to southwest direction from here now, but mostly in a south direction over the next 24 hours before it starts to push in a more south-southwest direction. But that next 24 hours of southerly movement plots it and puts it right along the Whitsunday coastline, which is a lot further to the south than what the Bureau, what the JTWC, and what most of the other guidance puts it at. So it's important to note that the GFS, and to a certain extent the UKMet model, which has a similar crossing right around Bowen, are a little bit on the outlying side to the south. The Access model continues to be an outlier to the north. In saying that the Access model was an outlier, I do have to stress it was a big outlier. Now it's really come back to the consensus of the modelling. If you track the tropical low / tropical cyclone over the next 12 hours, you see it pushing in a southwest direction even on Access now, and then continues to track in a west-southwest to southwest direction, and makes landfall round about Friday morning on the tropical coastline around the Ingham area. So that is while it's a northerly outlier, it is no longer as out there as it used to be, because it was plotting a Cairns crossing for a number of days there, and it was really being silly about it. It made no sense that the system would cross that far to the north, and so it has come back now to the fold somewhat, and we have an Ingham to Cardwell crossing on the Access model. Obviously that situation, maximum rainfall, happens in the Herbert Lower Burdekin around the Townsville area. The other thing you might want to note as we zoom into the Townsville area is the wind speeds coming off the water here in the northeast, coming from the east-northeast, which will help to drive up water levels right around high tide mark on the Friday morning. And that is not limited just to the Townsville area. It actually continues all the way south through to about Mackay, possibly even as far south as St. Lawrence, where we're going to see those waters at 34 to 40 knots driving in, driving up the water level right around that high tide mark. So that's quite a concern with a coastal crossing up around Ingham to Cardwell. So as we track this system in later tomorrow, we see some very heavy rain developing along the wet tropics coastline, extending into the Herbert and Lower Burdekin and the central coast on Whitsundays. And then that heavy rain continues around the Mackay to Bowen region over the coming period as well. So if you track it there, you can see that it makes landfall around about Thursday night to very early Friday morning, and we see the heaviest rainfall once again to the south of the system, anywhere from about Mackay north to about Ingham on this particular model. So as we look at the GFS model in a little bit higher resolution, and we track the system thanks to Weather Underground, we track the system's core. This is the very latest model data from the GFS. We can see that we're starting to get into the destructive winds here in the southwestern quadrant. Still a fairly loosely packed system until it gets close to landfall. Once it gets close to landfall, it tightens up a little bit, but still not your classical tropical cyclone structure, where you do have a fairly elongated type circulation. But you can see here 40 to 50 knot possibilities in terms of winds as it tracks southwards or south-southwestwards and eventually makes landfall in the Whitsundays region. Now remember, the GFS is a southerly outlier. The UK Met also has a crossing around Bowen. The European has a crossing right over or in the vicinity of Townsville. So this is the Euro tonight at 10 p.m. We can see that the system is very, very close to being named a tropical cyclone based on Euro guidance. The only issue with it is the technicalities associated with it, which means that we're not seeing those gales right here and right here getting right around the center of the system. They're a fair way removed from the center. That's what's creating the Bureau to hesitate calling this a tropical cyclone, because it doesn't fit what a tropical cyclone needs to be. So at the moment it's still considered a monsoonal low. But we can see here on the coast, once again, can I stress, whether it's a monsoonal low, whether it's a Category 1 cyclone, you're copying exactly the same thing in reality. So in semantics it's not a tropical cyclone. In reality you're going to get the same issues you do with a tropical cyclone regardless. Now as it pushes in a southwest direction, we see that the system on Thursday afternoon is really located just off the Ingham to Cardwell coastline. Now this is where the models diverge. Some of them have it continuing in a southerly direction, some of it have it pushing in a more southwesterly direction, some of it, like the Access model, pushes it directly west from there. The European model by this stage, though, does probably form this into a tropical cyclone. You can now see the gales are starting to wrap around the system more than halfway around and pretty close to the center of it. So looking at Thursday afternoon, the potential for it to be named by that stage. As we head to Thursday night, we continue to see a south to southwesterly track on the Euro. We're seeing the strongest winds hitting the Mackay area, so a long way further to the south is getting the strongest winds in the pressure gradient squeeze, as opposed to the tropical cyclone itself. Now we can see here, luckily in this particular scenario, the system is located to the east-northeast or northeast of Townsville, so they're getting offshore winds instead of onshore winds. So really the storm surge threat greatest in the Bowen to St. Lawrence region, according to this model guidance. But remember, it only takes a shift 50 or 100 k's to the west, and that greatest threat of storm surge includes then Townsville as well. So we can see here really crossing the coast somewhere between Townsville and Bowen, more around the Townsville to Ayr area. The ensemble of the European also suggests that it's going to cross between Home Hill, which is just south of Ayr. So if we look in, zoom in a little bit, this is Ayr. We can see here that the cyclone crosses right over the top of Ayr on Friday morning, I should say. But there is guidance from the European that suggests a crossing point from around about Cardwell all the way through to Bowen. So anywhere in this region here is the favoured area according to the European model, with a tightness, a real good tightness here in its ensemble members of around about Ingham to Ayr. So once it crosses the coast, those blustery conditions extend inland a long way too. So Moranbah could be seeing some fairly strong winds. So should Claremont, being located on the southern side of that. Now if we continue to track the system inland, you can see here possibly even some gale force winds at times in that Claremont region, Claremont to Ballyeando. The system tracks basically right over the top of Charters Towers according to this guidance, and then continues west into the northwestern districts of Queensland. So looking at rainfall, which is what people are most interested in with this particular system that are not on the coast, because this system should go inland a fair way and produce some fairly good rainfalls in the inland regions. We can start to see that by about 1 a.m. tonight we're going to start to see showers impinging on the coastline. 4 a.m. tonight we're going to see some heavier showers impinging on the exposed coastlines all the way from Bowen, Townsville, Cairns, and then as we head to 10 a.m. tomorrow morning we see the heaviest rain still offshore in the off the Townsville coastline, but we're also getting some pretty heavy falls developing around Mackay already by Thursday, and then Thursday afternoon those falls get even heavier. Those falls just off the coast of the Townsville coastline here, and we can see that on the southwestern edge of this system we have some torrential rainfall Thursday afternoon, but it doesn't quite make it on the coast. It's once again just offshore because the system's tracking in a more southerly direction. So we can see over there the 12-hour accumulated falls. We could be seeing upwards of 75 mils in 12 hours over the Mackay region and just off the coast of Townsville, whereas the falls also start to penetrate a fair way inland by Thursday night. As we head to Friday morning, we see those heavy, really heavy falls now starting to hit the Townsville coastline, which is the Herbert and Lyalbertican forecast district, and we see that the following 12-hour falls are much higher. Sorry, the 6-hour falls there are much higher in the Townsville to Mackay region, or the Ingham to Mackay region. As we then head towards the Friday period, Friday morning, when the system does make landfall, we see the heaviest rainfall located once again around Mackay and around where the system crosses. And then as we head to Friday afternoon, that extreme rainfall starts to push inland, and we see that parts of the northern goldfields and upper Flinders and even central highlands and coalfields anywhere north of about Emerald is receiving good rain. We also see this big feeder band here. You can see it just here on the screen, really pushing south, even as far south as Rockhampton, believe it or not. So this could be a big rain producer for central and northern Queensland as it tracks in a westerly direction. And we can see that rainfall continues into Friday afternoon, and then Saturday morning we start to see that rainfall just starting to ease off as the low starts to lose all forms of structure. So you can see the Bureau of Meteorology's forecast track for this system is the updated forecast track for this system is suggesting that the system will now cross just to the east or southeast of Townsville, between Townsville and Ayr. So they have taken basically everything I've shown you on the European and assumed it to be true. With this forecast model guidance. So, with this forecast track guidance. So we see that the tropical cyclone ends up making landfall somewhere between Townsville and Ayr, which is exactly what the Euro shows. But remember, there is still that variability from about Cardwell through to about Bowen on the European. So we may see that track change anywhere in that region over the next day and a half to 2 days as we head towards landfall. We also see it just tightening up in time to be a tropical cyclone on landfall around this region. So remembering, of course, that if it becomes a TC up here further to the north, we have and crosses the coast further to the north, we have a big storm surge threat for Townsville. If it crosses a little bit further to the south, the storm surge threat is limited to the region to its southeast. And so this area, even as far south as Mackay, possibly even as far south as St. Lawrence, are under threat of that storm surge. Remembering also that the high tide mark is around about 10 o'clock on the Friday. This system is expected to cross, according to current guidance, at 7 o'clock on Friday. So it's still touch and go. This will change, so don't take this as gospel. But at this point in time, it looks like the system will cross at the halfway point, or around the halfway point of the tide changes. So that's pretty good news. If it crossed a little bit later at 10 a.m, we'll be talking about a more significant storm surge impact. But remember, this can change. If it goes a little bit slower or a little bit faster, a lot of things can change in this track. So looking at the OCF model guidance, we can see for rainfall, we can see that what that means over 24 hours. Tomorrow we're going to see some very heavy falls, 100 plus millimeters over the Mackay region. We're going to see those falls 50 to 100 getting into the Townsville coastline, which is the Townsville southwards region, as the tropical low or cyclone at that stage tracks in this southerly direction. We see those falls actually extending a fair way inland and a fair way south to St. Lawrence even, and possibly even some shower activity further south towards Gladstone, believe it or not, but very, very light falls there. Also, the northern Cape York Peninsula and the Torres Strait continues to just fire with this relentless monsoon trough. So does the top end coast of the Territory, and so does the far northern Kimberley. We'll still see showers and storms continuing over the Pilbara and Kimberley and Gascoyne regions as well over the WA. As we head to Friday, we see that very heavy rainfall crosses the coast, or as the cyclone crosses the coast, so too does that rainfall. Mostly to the south of about Ayr, we see the really heavy stuff, and remember those feeder bands right around Mackay, creating a situation there where they could see 200 to 300 millimeters over 24 hours in those feeder bands. Those feeder bands are just awesome, folks. Once you get under them, they don't move for a while. You get 30, 40, 50 millimeters an hour for the period of 6 to 12 hours. It's pretty phenomenal stuff. That rainfall extends a long way inland too now. We can see 50 to 100 millimeters extending to the south of Charters Towers around the Claremont area, and also extending even out to the central western districts, although those falls will be much lighter. We also see some rainfall extending south towards Gladstone as well. So this entire region of the coastline looks like it's going to get a lot of rain. Unfortunately, Cairns northwards not looking like much at all, being on the northern side of the system. The monsoon continues to crank in the far north and also continues to crank over the northwest coast. As we head to Saturday, we see those rainfalls start to ease, but we still have 25 to 50 millimeters in the Mackay coastline region, all the way down to about Rocky. That rainfall over inland Queensland also eases. That tropical low starts to lose its structure and therefore loses its feeder bands coming in off the Coral Sea, loses the moisture coming in off the Coral Sea. The monsoon starts to weaken a little bit, but we're still seeing a very active phase here over the northwestern peninsula. Also the top end coastline, things are starting to get limited to the very, very edge of the coastline here, and they're not extending a long way inland anymore. Also we see an easing of activity over the Kimberley and Pilbara, so generally a more stable period there on Saturday. And then as we head to Sunday, we start to see the focus of rainfall activity heading northwards again to the Herbert Lower Burdekin, North Tropical Coast, and the Mackay North region. Also on the far northern peninsula, we start to see more rainfall on the northeastern peninsula. And we also see some increase in rainfall out here in the far eastern Coral Sea, and that will be attached to a new low pressure system that's likely to form in that area. Also a new low pressure system is likely to form here off the Kimberley coastline. So by Sunday we start to see those things taking a little bit of shape, and we'll talk more about those in future updates. But for tonight and for tomorrow, we are firmly focused on the Coral Sea system. So those were the next 4 days. The 4 days after that, though, we continue to see a cranking monsoon, particularly over the Coral Sea, which will result in a low pressure system somewhere in that Coral Sea. Or possibly even the northern Gulf of Carpentaria. But we're going to see 200 to 300 millimeters over the next 4-day period in this region. We're still going to see some good shower and rain activity here on the tropical coastline, associated with the southeast surge pushing up the coast, mixing with a fairly strong northeast and northwest monsoon. We're going to see continued activity over the Gulf country and some very, very heavy rainfall over central parts of the Northern Territory, so that's very positive for that region. And we're going to see continued activity here on the northwestern top end coast, and we're going to see an increase in rainfalls again over the Kimberley, possibly the Pilbara, depending on what happens with a new tropical low development as we head to the 5th of February. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight. We'll have another update tomorrow night. If we're on the road tomorrow night chasing a tropical cyclone, our update tomorrow night will be very brief. It'll only be a 5-10 minute thing because on the road we want to focus more on chasing the system rather than focusing on updates. Alright, thanks very much for watching, and we'll talk again tomorrow night.